IEBC commissioners yesterday, I believe it was Abdi Gulier, said the three of them have no apologies to make. They said for the last 6 years, it was all about removing them from office, but they said there were bigger issues such as highly competitive elections and the ethnic nature of elections. Where do I start? Can I start with Mwalimu, with your permission?
Of course.
Mwalimu, no apologies to make. What did you make of that statement?
I think that was a very loaded statement, especially when we have just come from very emotive elections, and we are trying to bridge the gap in our society where we feel that after elections we must move forward. And also in an institution there are quite a number of challenges. We are not going to say that the IEBC never did anything. There are elections which were carried out and they went on quite well and quite smoothly. And you see, IEBC must be a very independent commission. When you look at our constitution, the constitution in 2010, you look at article, I think, 248 and 250 on how we elect and select a commission, you realize that they must be independent. And what brings this is that the sovereignty of a country depends on the power. It is about the power of the people that makes the sovereignty of a country. I think the IEBC, as much as they would say that they have no apologies, it is about the country. And when the country, sometimes a very emotive election where almost the two sides of they have almost equal electorates, I think in the future we need to have a way that the IEBC, even after conducting election, we have the country coming up together and saying that this was a well done exercise. And I believe that as a country, we know that the IEBC, mostly where the problem comes in is the presidential election. This is our country. I think because we have a presidential system of governance. I think if we had maybe a parliamentary system of governance, maybe it would be different about this election. But because we have a presidential system where the president will determine, you realize last week you saw the president in Luo Nyanza. He goes with the goodies because he's the president of the country. He is able to determine, even if we will bring it to the cabinet secretaries, he has the final authority, most likely, where this kind of development will go. So we need to relook again at our constitution, see whether it is serving the interests of this country. If we need to have amendments, because we have lawyers here, after 8 years or 10 years, we can still have amendments in our constitution. But where we need to put our eyes is the IEBC, the selection. Are they really independent? Do they have political ambition? Do they serve the interests of our political parties? This is why that the appointment of the IEBC members should go through the parliament, and their names, of course it goes through the parliament, but we really need to critically look at the people who have the interest and who do not have political affiliation to any political party. We must not have affiliation or inclination or otherwise to any political party. I think this is where we stand as a country.
All right. I suppose the question then, is it possible to get such people? But MP for Molo, do you support? They called for a public inquiry. They said this was the election where there was the most attempts at interference. Do you support the calls for a public inquiry?
Yes, you know, against all odds, and I really want to salute this great man, Chairman Chebukati, and the other commissioners who, against all odds, they refuse all the intimidation. And I think that's just part of the iceberg. It's just what they could probably say on nation media. But I think there's a lot more that went on behind the scenes. You're talking about the interference by the Security Council, you know, the alleged, you know, these DCI officers who are heavily armed, you know, wanting to go and arrest them. And against all these odds, they stood their ground and made the announcements, even when they thought that that was against what, you know, the big boys wanted. And I really like the learning curve that the IEBC has taken. In 2017, the nullification of the presidential election, you know, one thing I picked from it was that elections start and end at the polling station. And it should be as simple as that. that my grandmother can go and vote at Mwangi Mchuki Primary School, and if she can hang around and wait for the results to be announced, then in the least she can know the performance of all the 6 candidates in that polling station. And therefore, the role of the Commission of IEBC is just to tally, all these results. And the tallying is not, you're not taking a calculator and adding 1 + 1 +, no. There's a whole system that correlates all of it up, and the results are there for people to see. And if you remember, especially media houses outside Kenya, were very quick to just pick on the results and actually even just declare the winner long before even the chairman of the commission really did declare the results. So I'm seeing someone who, and a commission that has learned from the mistakes that they made and now taking over from the ruling of 2017 and doing a much better election in 2022. However, I think they were still not able to convince Kenyans about the perceived impartiality of the commission. And I think one of the reasons why we had not so high turnout in the last, I think we had one of the lowest voter turnout in the last election was there are very many people who felt that their vote did not count. That the deep state and the system would rig or would influence the election in a particular way. And therefore, those that wanted to vote for a particular candidate felt, why do I need to go to vote? Because after all, my candidate is going to win or without my vote. And also the other side, some people felt, why do I need to vote for my candidate, in this case Kenya Kwanza candidate, considering that will be rigged out by the other guys and the system. And that messaging was so clear, and I think IEBC somehow was not really able to convince Kenyans otherwise. So I'm really looking forward to the new commission, learning from where the commission picked at 2022 and having an electoral body that Kenyans believe in, that believe that their votes will actually get to count. And subsequently, therefore, that people can just go and vote. And the good thing, 2022 showed us that Kenyans are willing to accept the results and move on. Like in the past where there were chaos, I think we have now buried that in the past. I don't think that we'll ever have post-election violence again in this country. And therefore, if they're able to convince more Kenyans to turn up and vote, therefore we're going to have a leadership that is probably more acceptable across the country, because people believe in the credible process of this election. And lastly, the cost of this election. I think we also need to have an inquiry, not really an inquiry, but a real proper audit of how much does our election cost, and do we really need to spend this money on this election? Because we run one of the most expensive elections in the world. If we look at the cost per voter, just to go and cast those 6 ballot papers, it's one of the highest across the world. We're talking about how do we make sure that we reduce this cost? How do we make sure that our diaspora Kenyans, who remit the highest source of dollars, foreign currency to Kenya, how do we make sure that they count in the electoral process of this country? And we had, for the first time, an attempt to have the diaspora vote for the president, but it was just in a few states, and our diasporans will tell you that the way the voter registration and verification was done, it was not really friendly to them. It's like we didn't want some of them are saying like we didn't want them to vote. You're just making sure that there's a convenience.
Tokenistic.
It was tokenistic. So how do we really make sure that our great men and women who live and work outside the country and who really make a great contribution to the economy of Kenya actually count in a political process through their participation in the electoral process? Okay. And I'm thinking if we get around this, and I really want to persuade my political class that when replacing and the recruitment of these IEBC commissioners, let us take away our interests completely. Let us have as neutral Kenyans run this electoral body as possible. And I'm sure there are very many competent, hard-working Kenyans out there who would be acceptable across the political divide. Let's have them run this commission, and let's make it as independent can be, as our drafters of our constitution intended to be.